Hello and welcome back to the Josh and Anna podcast. We are your hosts and we have some guests in the house today. We're super excited to introduce good friends, Tim and Joscelyn.
Hello.
How are you guys doing today?
Fantastic.
Nervous.
We got so much to talk about. We'll probably not be able to get through all of it, but what I'm going to do is go through some articles of things that have happened this week and recently over the past month, some bigger things. We're going to start with really small things and then slowly get deeper and deeper. And I'm hoping the conversation gets more and more conspiratorial. That's what I'm hoping.
It's gonna. You invited the right people.
Did you guys see this? Burger King's getting sued. They're getting sued.
Actually, I did hear that.
They're getting sued because they've been misrepresenting their burgers, their Whoppers, as bigger than they actually are. Which, I mean, is that really surprising?
I could have told you.
First of all, who goes to Burger King right now?
Do you guys like Burger King?
No,
I don't know anyone that goes to Burger King.
Burger King was a huge thing. When I talked to you and you said that Burger King was like the worst, I was like, what are you talking about? Burger King is the best. Like in Brazil, if you go to a Burger King today, the lines are huge because they're really good. They're bigger than McDonald's sandwiches.
Really?
And they have a reputation of being better than Burger King.
Like high quality.
Exactly. So I used to be like in line for 20 minutes just to get a Burger King's sandwich. So when I came here, I haven't tasted an American burger.
Just don't. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I know. You told me like, oh, they suck. Don't go there. I was like, okay, I won't go there. So
you
I
haven't been?
No.
You know what? We should
go get some
after
and
the
bring it
podcast.
back.
Yeah.
I have been living in this country for 2 years, and I've never tasted Chick-fil-A. I have never tasted Taco Bell.
Taco Bell.
Oh.
I
Wendy's.
got a story about Taco Bell.
Is it a good story? It's not a good story.
It can never be a good story if it's about Taco Bell.
Yeah.
It ended with me in bed for 3 days.
Yeah, he was
my
hallucinating
goodness.
at one point. It was not good.
I am so sorry.
Haven't had it since, but you know, I used to love it, but not anymore.
I've heard of the Taco Bell squirts. Never
Stop it.
Never the Taco Bell hallucinations.
I'll put it this way: that was like a third of the story. That was a third of the story, and the rest was.
Boy, we're leaving out 2/3. So this next article is something that should come as no surprise. Fast food has been proven to be worse for you than it was 10, 20, even 30 years ago.
Okay.
Several reasons for that this GBH article points out. One of them being the overall macros of this same product have been getting worse. So if you buy the same, let's say Big Mac, than it was 20 years ago, it has more fat, more sodium, and more garbage in it than it did that our parents, our grandparents, great-grandparents were eating.
Right.
And so the portion sizes are also getting bigger too. So the burger that used to be 600 calories is more like 800 today.
I see.
So it's ballooning in calories, fat, and sodium.
Yeah, I remember being in college like 10 years ago, and I had libertarians professors that, defended the McDonald's market because they said, like, capitalism is what lifted people from poverty all over the world, which is true. Like, whatever you think about capitalism, it is what lifted people out of poverty in countries like my own. You open the market, people can invest in things, they can become entrepreneurs, and they come out of poverty, whatever you think of it. And McDonald's is one example of that. And they use the what's the name of their main burger?
Big Mac.
The Big Mac, yes. They use the Big Mac as an example. So, like, you have a salad in the burger, you have 2 actually proteins, and you have the carbs, and all in one. And they have the cheese, which is the fat. So you have all the nutrients that you technically need in a day. And if you're like a homeless person, you can't technically survive on only eating that for the rest of your life. If you want to, you have the protein, you have the fat, you have the carbs, all in one meal. So they defended that. But you're saying that in 20 years, that has changed. Like, now it's not the same product anymore.
The same homeless person now has diabetes.
Have you ever seen the videos of people that have saved McDonald's for however many years.
Yeah.
The
And
guy
then-
who ate a
Creepy.
Big Mac every day for
Yeah,
like
had-
30 years.
Well,
Yeah.
that was Super Size Me, right? That documentary.
So there was the documentary where
Okay.
someone decided to eat 3 meals a day at McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was this guy who we had looked at who had eaten several Big Macs a day, specifically just Big Macs
Oh,
for
with the
35
For
yeah, with the
50
hair.
years. Exactly,
Okay,
yeah.
I've
And
seen that guy.
he's
yeah.
relatively
Healthy.
in good health. Like
Yes.
his cholesterol, his blood levels, his lipids, everything seems to be relatively within, when you compare it to the average American, in a decent range. But what a really important part of that was he seemed to have a very healthy, functional family
Yes.
that he loved,
And a
he,
positive
mindset,
Yes.
so low stress, and we don't know what he did for a living, but we know that he was working out in the sense that he had very high activity levels. He said he would walk around his block once a
Yeah.
day, but that block was like 8 miles.
Yeah.
So he was doing that every day.
Yes.
That might be the most significant contributing factor,
Yeah.
but I think if you do have healthy relationships, it doesn't mean that I should resign myself to just eating Big Macs all the time.
Yeah.
I think that it's like a four-legged stool,
Yeah.
right? Where you have any of those legs and now it's unstable.
Yeah, it's
that
a
are missing.
balance.
It's a balance thing.
Yeah.
I'm big on moderation. I'm big on balance.
Yeah.
I'm big on balancing all these areas of your life.
Yeah.
That being said, after reading that study, I've significantly shifted my mindset into thinking I don't need to be keto every meal of my life, because what I'm trying to achieve probably won't be achieved through that one button or
Yeah.
that lever that I'm pulling.
Yeah.
Yes, and you know what? Not every person that you meet in your life is gonna be a good connection. So you have people that you meet that they will gossip all the time and they will talk negatively all the time. And the more time you spend with those people, the more you're gonna be like them. When you start talking like the people around you. But if they're good people and if they see life in a good way and if they're grateful.
Right.
And the way that they talk is positive, then you start being positive, because you can't be negative around people like that.
Well, I think like what you're talking about is really true. Like, it is like you said four-legged stool.
Mm-hmm.
However many legs you have on that stool, like the more the better. But I think like something that's really important is like understanding that if you're like you're saying, if you're around good people, kind of the rest follows.
Yes.
So it's like if you have good relationships and with actually good people that are looking out for the best of themselves and for you,
Yes.
then you have like, okay, so you have a good relationship, but then they're also going to want you to be healthy. So
Yes.
you're going to eat healthy, and then
Yeah.
they also want you in good community.
Yeah.
And then they're going to check, like we were talking about a little, like, I don't know, an hour ago or something. Those people will want you to also just be doing what's right in life. And just
Yeah.
in general, I think, the one thing follows.
Yes.
And so that's why I would agree with that statement, that's the
Yes.
best thing is to have good friends.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and family.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the habits that the people who you surround yourself with, they rub off on you as well. They say that you're a summation of your 3 closest friends. So
I get in these moods when I'm around certain people. I don't know why, because I view myself as like I'm an independent person. I'll just like exert my influence. But if I'm around certain people, I find myself picking up
Yes.
the way they say words
Yeah.
and certain phrases.
Yeah.
And I'll come back and she's like, "What are you doing? Like, why do you talk like that?" I'm like, "I'm sorry. I was talking out with this friend. I haven't talked to him in years."
Yeah.
But
I know. And I do think it's important to be attentive to those things, like who are you hanging out with, and then what do they bring out on you. Some people bring
right.
the best on you, and some people bring the worst on you. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not mindful, and if you're not honest to yourself, and you're not you're intentional, that's the word.
That's it.
If you're not intentional, then you just get what you can get.
Right.
You're not really thinking about anything. But if you're intentional, then you know what to look for. Look for the people that bring out the best on yourself, and stay away from the people that bring out the worst. Like, you're always complaining when you're around them, and you're always unhappy, and spend time with them, and when you leave, you're worse than when you got there. Run for the hills. Like, don't spend time with those people. They're not giving you anything. They're actually taking away something from you. They're taking away literally life. Like, they're taking
your life.
Health. Do not do that. Like, it's not worth it.
Whenever I feel anxious, if I'm gonna hang out with someone, I probably shouldn't be hanging out with them. Like, it's just not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like, with you guys, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hang out with Josh and Anna. Yeah. I was a little nervous about this podcast, but I'm not anxious hanging out with you guys. But like some people, I'm just like, I'd rather do anything else. And I feel like that's kind of, I hate to say a red flag, but that's a red flag.
It is. You know? It is. Because you just can't be yourself. You can't be yourself.
And if you can't, then
you have to prepare yourself. You have to be in a certain state of mind. Like, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. I agree with what you said. If you feel worse after hanging out with them, on average, you know, that's all I need to know.
And we've both been on that situation. We had friends that, like, we hang out with them, and afterwards we feel worse. And then it's like, why are we friends with this? So, like, sometimes when you're 20, it happens a lot. You're in college and you're making friends, and you don't really think about that stuff. You're trying to pass. You're trying to make friends. You're trying to connect with people. You don't know anybody. But then, like, 2 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, you realize, like, why am I friends with this person again? Like, why do I hang out with this person again? And I've been on that situation multiple times, and I've had friends that are no longer friends because I purposely took them out of my life. Like, I do not want to be friends with this person anymore, because 5 years ago they had a place in my life. Like, I was lost, didn't know anybody in campus. I met them, they were good friends at the time, but then I grew and they didn't, or they did in an opposite direction that I do not want to go. Right. So when I talk to them, we have completely different views, and when I leave heavy. Like, I'm not happy, and I feel like I'm hiding myself from them, because if I tell them something that I think it's an achievement, they are not going to see it as an achievement, and I can't share and be happy about it because they are not going to be happy about it, because then I can be like myself, like 2% in front of them. So it's like, why am I friends with you anymore? So I feel like there are friends that belong to a certain season in life, and then you move on. And they no longer belong to, and there's nothing wrong with that. So there are people that I don't think like are bad people, but they are people that belong to the young you, and then you outgrow that shell, and they no longer fit. They just don't fit. They fit in a different shell, and that's okay. But they just no longer fit to that person that you are currently.
Yeah, it's almost like circumstantial friendships. Yeah. You know, like you have, you're in this class with me, so we're gonna be friends because we get along the most, or we have the most in common. Yeah. You know, but then you're done with that circumstance, you're done with that class, for example, and see ya. Sayonara. Yeah. You know, like there's a lot of those, and we try and like drag them on to our next stage in life, but they don't belong there. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also like it's a disservice to yourself, because not to sound like that, but you know, if you keep trying, I see so many people that try and like keep people. You know, they're like, well, we were friends at a stage, and they meant something to me, so they try and do that, and it really is a disservice, because you continually have this like, oh, well, I have to save face. I can't tell this person, I can't be upfront with this person anymore. And so, especially when they get to a point where like they're going down a path that you're like, that's actually, regardless of what you think, that's detrimental to your health.
Yes.
Like, we're talking about like health problems. Like that's a huge thing. Yeah. And you're just like, you know, at some point you just kind of have to cut the cord and be like, okay, like I'm not your dad. Yeah. I'm not your wife or your husband. Yes. Yeah. Like that's something you have to figure out. But like if you continue down that path, it is detrimental to you, and you just you know, it's not good for your health. So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's like if you want what's best for someone, you tell them the truth. Yeah. But if you don't, you'll tell them whatever makes them happy. You know, if you just know someone, but you really don't respect them, you don't like them, you know, you'll just tell them whatever because you don't want to get in a confrontation. Right. But to risk the friendship to improve them. Yeah. That's something where your love has to come first.
Yeah, and that you also don't want to be anybody's doctor when you're not a doctor or a therapist. So you say like, this is what I believe. I don't think you're doing the right thing. And then they keep doing the same thing, and you just like you're in that position that you keep calling them out, and they're like, this is no longer beneficial for any of us because you don't want to stop doing what you're doing, and I don't want to be on this position that I became your psychiatrist. I am not a psychiatrist. I'm just a friend. So just leave, and it's okay to leave. because it's not helping you and it's not helping them. You know, like it's a relationship that is not beneficial for any parties. Yeah. So
Right.
I've broke out of relationships like that. I like have so many horror stories about this, but like there are relationships that are not worth any of our times. And then you just move on and you find new relationships and people that will bring you up and they will make you better and you will grow and you'll be so much better with them in your life. And they will figure it out, their problems on their own, and they will find other people to help them, but it's not going to be you. You don't need to be the savior.
Right.
You know, like just be okay with not being the savior every time. Just move on. You know, God will take care of it. They will take care of it. They're responsible for their lives. You're not. So just move on. It's okay. It's okay to move on.
Stop. Get help.
Get some help.
I love this conversation. In other news,
Stop.
get help. Oh my gosh. I was just reading. This is a string of articles, so I just picked one because it was one of about a dozen I read that were saying the exact same thing. I'm sure we're all very aware of this. It's coming out of Fortune magazine. Housing market affordability is worse now than at the height of the bubble in 2006.
Well, yeah.
Which precipitated the global financial crisis.
Yeah.
Kind of a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
So all the leading indicators you can look at, they're worse now than they were then. And so we all know about inflation. We know that wages have not kept up with the cost of assets. They're worse now, the ratio of assets to average wages, than they were in 2006, 2007. And so we know this because we've been looking for a house. We want to go to Florida.
Yes.
We just got a job offer in Florida, and now we're scrambling looking for a house. And I know you guys have also talked about looking for a house as well. And so, like most of us, like in our 20s and in our early 30s, we're looking for, you know, that next stage.
Yes.
And it's becoming a distant dream. It's becoming like a further away from us as opposed to getting closer to us.
Yeah.
And it's like what's frustrating is the rate at which the average person can save is being outpaced by the rate at which housing prices are going up. And then with the rates going up, it just becomes something where it's like, well, how am I even going to do this?
Yeah.
Well, even like it's crazy for us because a little bit after you guys, but like, you know, in 2020 when we got the house that we're living in now, it was very like anytime you buy a property, a house, whatever, it's a lot of money. But like, you know, you break down like the interest rate and everything, and you see how much monthly you're paying, and you're like, okay, that's doable. You know, I can see how I can make that. Like for most people, you go from renting to owning a property, so you go to a mortgage, and that's like it's been actually cheaper in the past if you own a house. If you're like, okay, I'm going to live here a while or whatever, it's cheaper to own a house than it is to rent.
You get that money back at the end of the day.
And then on top of that, it's like you get the money back and then you have an asset, which is fantastic. And now for us, like looking, if we're like, okay, we want to not only if we want to move to a better area or have like a house where we could have kids potentially and things like that, it's looking like, you know, it's just not feasible, even like a monthly payment with the prices going up. And then additionally with the inflation, it's like, well, inflation, prices going up, and then with loans, like just at an astronomical high, it's like, you know, it's almost, you can do it, but it is it's always a risk. It was a risk regardless, but now it's such a risk where you're like, you know, I don't.
Is it even worth it?
Well, it's not even. Yeah, it's like, is it feasible?
Yeah,
really.
I can't imagine not having a home and thinking, oh, well, we'll just buy a home in this many years, and now these are the conditions. Like how.
I haven't been living in this country for not even 5 years now. It's gonna be 5 years in a month. I can't even believe
We
it.
got to have a party.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
I know. I need to throw a party for my 5th year in the U.S.
Yeah.
Maybe I
Absolutely.
like the theme is gonna be something about, you know, the U.S. Like
Should be like patriotic, like everything's American flag.
We all dress like a president.
There we go.
and I have to guess which one, and that will be my citizenship test.
I'll be Lincoln, and someone assassinates me at the end of the evening.
Oh,
Then
no.
it turns into
But
a murder mystery.
Yes, murder mystery.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's gonna be 5 years in a month and a few days, and this is, you know, the first house that I've ever gotten was this one that we live right now. And Josh, you had already bought this house before, so I've never been through the process of buying a house, but we did look at charts of how many years it took for a person to pay for their house in like 30 years ago, and now it takes us over, like, it take us so much longer.
About 30 years on average.
Yeah, to pay for our house. And
Right.
now we're looking for a different house because we want to move. And it's like, can we afford without selling a kidney? Like, I don't know. Do I have to go to the black market? Do I have to do feed stuff on OnlyFans? I don't know what I need to do, but I feel
Yes
like we
and
can.
yes.
I don't feel like we can afford it like on our normal stage because it feels outrageous and it feels so ridiculous. So I do believe that, you know, in 18 years ago was a lot better than now because you have like multiple things contribute into it. You have inflation, you have interest rates, you have the amount of houses being sold times the amount of people trying to buy and houses.
Low inventory.
Exactly. You know, there were times a year and a half ago that we were looking at houses and they would sell in a day and a half. And we're like, okay, so that house that we saw yesterday sold.
Right.
Yeah.
Completely sold. And now houses are sitting down for like months. And we're like, okay, is this the turn? Like, is this means that we can offer less money?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and we can start being reasonable again? Does that mean
Sellers have been very stubborn
Yeah.
because people that are selling their homes right now are very aware of all their neighbors who have sold homes over the past year. And they're thinking, oh, well, the Joneses and the Steves, that they all sold their homes
Yeah.
for, you know, so much above asking.
Yeah.
And it was so easy for them.
Yeah.
And now ours is just sitting for some reason.
Yeah.
So I don't want to bring it down. I could be
Right.
leaving a lot of money on the table. And so
Yes.
they're waiting. And so that's,
Yeah.
I think it's hubris, it's ego, it's comparison.
Yeah.
Literal comparison with the Joneses that is making stubborn home sellers really sticky,
Yeah.
if you will. But they'll never come back down to where they were. When you see these big ramp ups in the past 100 years for home prices, they might correct a little, but they never correct back to where they were. And so during COVID, you know, March 2020, you had the economy looking like it was going to absolutely collapse because
Yeah.
everyone was forced to stay home. How
Yeah.
are you going to get your GDP up?
Yeah.
And so they decided to just inject a whole bunch of money into the economy,
Yeah.
give people checks to stay home, businesses checks just to stay open without bringing people back.
Yeah.
And so we had trillions of dollars that just was given out and printed out of nothing.
Yes, coming from nowhere. Yeah.
What the analysis was, the amount of money printed was 40% of the total amount of money in circulation.
Right.
I did not know that.
Yeah, right? 40%.
Whoa.
So it's no surprise to me that now housing prices on average are 40% higher
Yeah.
than they were 3 years ago.
Yes.
It was a direct correlation. So
Yeah.
I see them maybe correcting a little. I don't
Yeah.
see them correcting a lot. As long as two things are true. Number one being inventory is incredibly low. So the amount of people who want a home,
Yeah.
it eclipses the amount of homes that are actually being sold.
Yeah.
So as long as that's true, you know, just have supply and demand.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
Yeah.
And the other thing is most people have jobs. Unemployment is low.
Yeah.
Somehow. Unemployment is very low. And so
Yeah.
as long as that's true, people have jobs, they can make payments.
Yeah.
But for how long?
Well, a lot
Because-
of people can rent too.
Yeah, a lot of
They
people are
just
renting.
prefer to rent instead of buying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've thought about that. We think we're going to, when we first get down to Florida,
Yes.
we'll just rent for a little
Yeah.
bit while we're looking for
Yeah.
a home to come up in what we're looking for.
And we talked to our real estate agent. She sells so many houses. She's told us multiple times, like a lot of people will just rent for a long time just because it is not worth it to buy a house. Okay.
And we're back. So I have to put out an apology. We had the cameras kind of shut off, so Anna was in the middle of a thought. Now it's gone forever.
Can't get it back.
Yeah, what were we even talking? I guess
I
it's
don't
not
know.
important. It's gone.
It doesn't
It's
matter.
gone.
Yeah.
And there's another article. I have no idea. I've never seen this in my life because
Okay.
this was 3 a.m. when I found this.
Okay.
It must
So it's
be
a
good.
different Josh.
Oh my gosh.
So we're reading this together for the first time. New breakthrough paves the way for extending human lifespan. Scientists successfully transfer longevity gene.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. For people that are watching this or listening to this, Josh, a half of this podcast, is obsessed with living longer.
I'm gonna live to be 1,000.
And every day he talks about how close we are to discovering something to make us live longer than we should.
Said something very interesting. You said, as long as we should live, presupposing that there's a moral imperative to live at a certain age. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, what is the age at which we should die?
Well, so here's the thing. I'm a Christian, right? So the Bible says that no human after, like, the very first book, the Genesis book, people lived until 900 years.
Methuselah, 969.
Yeah, 900, 800,
Good
700,
for him.
600.
Plan to surpass that.
It
That's
was it was a long time, centuries. And then at certain point they said, like, after this, no human should live over 150. So now,
Really?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
in the
there's a
Bible.
verse,
So
yeah.
that's
Wow.
Moses, we think, wrote Genesis.
Right.
And so we're presupposing Moses assumed 150 would be the limit.
Yeah, so there's
ultimate limit.
theories, like,
Okay.
if you believe the Bible, there's theories why that was something that the Lord established. And one of the biggest reasons what I think it's because in the beginning we didn't have enough people to populate the earth. So people had children for a long time, and the children married each other. So you had sisters and brothers marrying each other.
Very
And-
West Virginia here.
Yeah. And then at a certain point, we had enough people, and they said, like, okay, we have enough people now. The gene pool is established. You do not need to marry each other's sister anymore, and you do not live for that long anymore, because the world was so corrupted that, it's just, it doesn't make sense anymore. We're going to establish the amount of years that we can live, and then you're going to die, and one day we're going to live forever, but it's not now. It's not on a broken world. And I think our world is broken. I really believe that. And by the way, like, I am the biggest fan of science, and I think that God is the biggest fan of science. I truly believe when people say, like, it's either science or God. I think you're wrong. I think it's both. I think that he can do things in science, and we just understand parts of it, but he understands everything, and he made everything. But I truly think that we live for a certain time for a reason. Like, our lives have a limit for a reason.
Do you think that around the same time when he was like, you shouldn't live 150 years, that was the same time when you stopped having like 8 wives or 12 or however many? Like,
No.
No, actually.
Okay.
But
Like after Cain and Abel, it was just that long list of blah 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 and blah blah.
Until Noah,
Yeah.
and then, like, it rained, and Noah's family was the only one left.
So in all fairness, there were multiple times throughout the Bible where there was a guy with a bunch of wives.
Yes.
Right.
Never went well. Never
Yeah.
went well once.
Yeah, which is, like, people read the Bible differently. I always read the Bible as in two things. One, it's like God presenting himself to us. And one of the things that you see throughout the Bible is, like, God does not intervene with a lot of our issues. We choose a lot of the things that we do. So when people say, like, if God is real, why there's so much evil in the world? And I heard this thing the other day saying, like, there's that wisdom that says, I don't ask God, why is there so much evil in the world? Because I'm afraid that God is going to ask me the same thing. Because he gave us the world. So there are people hungry in the world, but we have enough food. Why are we not doing something about it? Like, it's on our hands. We created so much evil when we could create good. We can. We just don't. Like, why don't we?
It brings up a really good point, and I do agree with you, because I really view things through the lens of what a lot of sci-fi shows have explained what would happen if we could live into perpetuity.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen the show Altered Carbon?
yes,
Yeah.
I love Altered Carbon.
Yeah.
super crazy.
So if you have an ability to trade, like, meat suits, right, and jump your consciousness into someone else or an organically grown clone, and you could just person hop forever, what would happen to a person living hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years?
So there's a little film called Harry Potter where a guy split his soul 7 different times.
Yeah.
And
We do not say his name.
no, I'm not going to say it. But I feel like if we were able to do that, like you're saying, jump meat suits, I don't think it would be good.
No, yeah.
It just-
Probably just for the sole reason that in the past 21 episodes on this podcast, the primary theme that I found, and it wasn't even my intention to explain this, but I just realized it emerged out of 21 episodes, was every single time humanity deviates from the natural, bad things happen.
Yeah.
And then we have this new set of problems that we try to fix, which end up deviating from the natural, and it spirals out of control.
Yes.
It's that Mother Nature always wins, no matter what.
Yeah.
And so that's the theme, I think, the unintentional theme
Yeah.
of the Josh and Anna podcast is don't mess with nature.
Right?
And so what are we doing right now? We're messing with nature.
Right.
So what
Yes.
is the most natural dying of old age? It's probably like between 100 years and 120 years at the very most if you did everything perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but
if you want to go to the Guinness Book, you die at that age.
that being said, it's a lot of people's opinion that with the human body and with science in general, it's not what it's made to do, it's what it can do.
Yes.
And so there were some scientists that are working out of the University of Rochester that asked the question, why is it that different types of rodents live a lot longer than other types of rodents? You take the naked mole rat, lives decades, and then you take the average field mouse, less than 10 years. So why? And they realized that the naked mole rat had a specific gene, and we've gotten better with our equipment and our knowledge of genetic science to pinpoint specific genes, and we have ability to snip genes on certain protein points and transplant them. And so they said, well, what if, getting so uncomfortable right now, what if we isolated and took this longevity gene in the naked mole rat and put it into a separate mouse? They did that, and the mouse lived, I think, 7% longer, but it was measurable.
Is this like the poop transfer thing?
That's
that
the
if you take
microbiome fecal transplant.
If you take fecal transplant, like someone's poop, and transfer to another person's poop, they get healthier?
Okay, that's a very different concept, but yes. But now they're trying to modify it so that it can be placed into humans.
Yeah.
And so what they're thinking is if you had a gene hacker who was able to isolate the longevity gene in dozens of species, put those into a single shot, you could give someone another 50 years.
That's a long time. There are people that don't live to 50 years. Like Joscelyn, you seem to be bothered by this. Like, what do you think about this whole thing?
I just think that you shouldn't be messing and splicing and injecting. But I'm also reading on this screen, naked mole rats can live up to 41 years, and I'm also shocked at that fact. So let's just take a moment for that. But
Is it because they're naked? If we didn't wear clothes, could we add more years to our
Nudists
lives?
everywhere are freaking out.
Right.
Where's the study on
Nudists
that?
don't want you to know this, but
That's a good
No, I just feel like there's no. Why are we doing this? Like that's my
To
question.
live longer.
Just have more friends. That's all you need. You need better relationships.
you
in
can
order
even
to
eat
live long.
McDonald's. You could eat whatever
So
you
what
want.
I'm
Doesn't
hearing
matter.
is it's the quality of the years, not the number of years.
I think-
For sure.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting if you start. I forget what. I don't know where I heard this, so take this with a grain of salt. But I have heard that like the second, like what makes humans able to do what they're able to do. So like people that go out and they are insane scientists or they amass large amounts of wealth. Like one of the biggest things is the fact that like we have a mortality. And we don't know when that mortality happens.
It's a driving force. It's a
Perspective.
motivation.
Exactly, because otherwise, like, look, I'll use myself as an example. You have like a month off of work or something like that, and you're like, I could get so much done.
Yeah.
And what do you do in that month off of work? Well, you sit around and binge watch Netflix and eat Cheetos or whatever. And I think like one of the biggest things is that if we were able to unlock like how not to die,
Yes.
that wouldn't mean that we would all essentially, not all of us, but I think for most of us, we'd essentially just become blobs. And it's the fact that we have mortality. I mean, for us, it's more than that. We understand that there's a spiritual realm and there's things that like are innately important to us.
Yeah.
Like whether that's family or being, a wife or a husband or all those things, but also like the fact that we're going to die. So we don't have forever. Like, every day you wake up and your back hurts, you're like, oh, I'm getting older.
Yeah.
And that's good because then you know that like your time is finite on this earth at the very least. And you have to make the most of it.
Yeah.
This is not, by the way, a question that we don't know the answer for at all. Like we have tinier examples of the same principle. Like in, 200 years ago, we were not as comfortable as we are now. We had the Industrial Revolution. They made work differently. Now we can work from home, which is a crazy concept.
Insane.
CEOs hate it.
And you can make so much money from like your couch. You don't even change to go to work. We have like these crazy concepts now. You have like a care day, and you have therapists, and you have mental health as actually like seen as illnesses, so treated as such. So We have a lot of comfort around our lives. We have food delivered to our doors. We have goods and services delivered to our doors. We are surrounded by comfort in a way that we've never been before. But at the same time, we have the most amount and highest amount of mental illnesses than ever before. We've never had this much comfort, and we've never had this much unhappiness in life. So you can see, like, we've always strived for this, but this is not making us happy. Now we're striving to live longer. Do you really think that that's going to make us happier?
I would say no, but I think it depends on the person. And I think that this will probably start as a very niche thing that's only kind of helpful. I believe that in our lifetimes, I really do believe that they will isolate certain things, certain components, and it will be a mass experiment. No one will know what would happen.
Yeah.
Politicians will scramble to legislate whether or not to allow this, whether or not this is even morally acceptable, and there will be a lot of ethical questions. People are already injecting themselves with all kinds of things. If you've seen these Netflix documentaries on gene splicing and gene hacking and gene therapy, and it's as crazy as someone wanting more muscle, or it's solving an 8-year-old who's blind, who's born with 2 pairs of genetic defects for his vision from his mom and his dad. Now he can see. And so there's 2 different things. It's going to start by bringing people who are genetically impaired back up to the level of the average human, and it will end with the average human wanting the vision and eyesight of an eagle.
Yes.
You know, and so it's going to be superhuman will be the next step.
Yeah. We can't be just like, oh, we'll use it for good. We are not normal.
No.
Yeah.
And the military, I mean, can you imagine what they would want to do with that? I mean, they are frothing at the mouth. They're like, give me that eyesight.
Well, they already kind of. Like, I want to say
want
that they already do that though. Like every single pilot that doesn't have perfect vision, like they're already like a lot of people get LASIK, and I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with LASIK, but every single pilot has LASIK.
Yeah.
You know?
Something
I
to
didn't know
improve
that.
their
That's
vision.
true.
Yeah, like I don't know don't quote me on that, but I know that like a lot of them, if they need corrective lenses or whatever, like they almost all get LASIK because they have to have perfect vision to be able to fly.
Yes.
For reasons
For safety reasons,
right,
yeah.
exactly. So who's to say, like, what if they had a little bit better than perfect vision or whatever it is, like,
To keep the country safe.
it would be a strategic advantage. Now with the way the military is going, I think it's all going to be robots anyway, so I don't know that it matters.
That's
But
probably true.
that's a completely different conversation.
Such an important conversation, because this isn't just about extending human lifespan. It's about all these moral and ethical questions evolving around how would you potentially change the embryo of your future child? And this is happening in China right now, where scientists are already bending the rules that have been outlawed in other countries on the genetic engineering of children before they're born. But could you imagine, if that's possible, and it is possible, how much we could develop that? And then what will people do if you could select every characteristic of your child? And then you will have the collective consciousness, the collective, what would the average person want in a kid? And that's what all you would get.
Yeah, so this is what we've talked about every single episode, I feel like, which is there's always a group that is going to say, like, I don't feel like this is right. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to let nature decide. It's the crunchy people. It's like,
The Amish.
they will become the crunchy people
Love
at some
them.
point. It's like, I'm just going to let nature decide. I don't feel like I should be playing God because I'm not perfect. And if I try to make things perfect, they're not going to be because I am not perfect. And I'm just not going to do anything. And that's why we need these people, because most of the times these things go wrong. And they go wrong for reasons that we cannot imagine when we start thinking about them, because we start thinking about them with good intentions. You want to make the world better, and you want to become, safer, and you want to live longer, and you're going to be healthier. But they all go wrong because we're not pure creatures, and you cannot trust other people's intentions, and you also cannot control other people's intentions because that's immoral. Like, you can't just be a psychopath or a dictator, so you have to let people live freely. And if you just give them the rights of doing whatever they want with whoever they want, then we're just going to, do awful things along the way. But we need all kinds to make the world go around. So that's why we're always against things that, are controlling and limiting, because You need the crunchy people. You need the people that go like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
I think the Amish are our fail-safe, essentially. If we all destroy ourselves with like experimental RNA vaccines and all this stuff, we all just drop dead one day. It's like, okay, well now the Amish, they'll carry on the human legacy.
Right.
It's important.
Their pies will still be delicious.
It will be
fantastic.
Their shoe fly
Their
pies
chicken?
and the
Oh,
whoopie
my
pies
word.
and all their pies.
Everything they make is great.
It's so
Yeah.
good.
Right.
And they keep their way of life, and they're just like, oh, we're not using this technology. And you're like, but it would be so good. And they're like, we're not going to do it. And I'm like, I kind of get why. Because even though not every single one of their rules makes perfect sense, they've decided as a broad brushstroke, because we don't understand what's going to mess us up, we're
Yes.
not touching it.
Yes.
And they're fine.
You need that.
Yeah.
You need that.
Well, and not only are they fine, but they're insanely healthy. They like.
they
Have you
are.
ever seen the
I
a
don't think they
20-year-old
have a
Amish
case of,
boy?
they don't have a single case of autism, do they?
Yeah, I've heard that.
We got to look into that. Don't quote us.
Yeah, but I have heard that like a lot of these kind of nuanced diseases and problems and allergies and things that kids have nowadays, like maybe they do have them. I don't know, but like at least it's not. It's not crippling, and they're fine.
Yeah.
And they have very holistic, medical practices that they do where they're like, we're going to crush up some honey and a little bit of a flour, and they're good.
Yes.
It's insane.
So I will say, back when I worked at the hospital, I worked in a pediatric ER. So we had a bunch of Amish families that would come in whenever they absolutely needed care. So there was a new diagnosis of cancer that we found. And they didn't know anything. This was at the start of the pandemic, and they were just confused. Why is everyone wearing masks? Like, why is everyone doing all of this? So, I mean, I feel like they do seek out medical care whenever it's the absolute last resort. So they could have a lot of high incidences of autism and things like that we just don't know about because they don't seek out the care because it's not debilitating, it's not crippling. So that's another thing.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true.
I don't know if they've done studies. I want to say
interesting.
that I think I've heard of a study. Again, don't quote me on that, but I think I've heard of studies that it's at the very least it's much lower in those communities. But again, like you said, could be reporting, it could be who knows.
Well, there's a lot of problem with data everywhere. Like we don't know who reports or how much report is actually reliable. So that's true for everywhere. But that is a good point that they just might not report enough.
Yeah.
Good point.
It could be like a cultural thing too, where they just they're like, we don't. Maybe they just don't want that out in the public. I know they have a big thing with like photos. Well, some of them they don't like photos taken of them. They don't like because that's part of their lifestyle.
The vanity thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about
Right.
that. Yes, that's true.
So I don't know if it's all of them. I don't think it's all of them, but I know it's some of them. So.
Well, we've talked about this because I'm from Brazil, and in my country, I told Josh, it's like, certain things are seen as normal. And in here, they're not. Like, they're treated as special cases, and, there's so much attention to them, and you give them a name. And just because you give them a name doesn't mean they're different, but you treat them differently. So it might be a case of that. Like, you have people who have certain things that they have, like, either allergies or, they're in the spectrum, but you don't treat them differently. You just are like, yeah, this person's kind of particular. And you move on with your life, and they are integrated in life, and you don't give that a super importance. And you can judge that's like, oh, that's not great, or that's great, that's good. Like, it doesn't really matter. That's just how they do life.
Right.
And there are countries and societies that do that differently. But the U.S. is very particular about any kind of difference that people have.
Oh,
that's what I've noticed when I moved to this country. Like, people really like to celebrate differences in here. And I think it's
to
because...
a fault.
Yes, because certain things are just like, oh, you have like, you wear glasses. Okay. You just like, you wear glasses. Like, you're not special. Like, you wear glasses. There's just something about you. Like, you don't need to celebrate that.
Who cares,
Right.
Exactly. Like, you're colorblind. Like, nobody cares. Like, just move on. You're colorblind. People are gonna make fun of you sometimes if they really love you, and you move on. Like, that's, some societies take that as like something particular to you and they move on. But I feel like this society has grown so much that we look for things to make us feel special, and that might make us like a little, like we celebrate every single thing that we have
Could be.
different.
Like it definitely is to like a detriment where it used to be back in the day, like somebody's what do you say, neurodegenerate, or like a little different, right? Not
neurodiverse.
That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you, nurse. And like that used to just be like, oh yeah, that's John. He's a little weird, you know, and it was fine. And you move on, and John ends up getting a job and getting married and having like a normal life, whatever.
Yes.
And I think it really is to so many, especially kids now, like it's to their detriment, regardless of what the category is that they're putting these kids into.
Yeah.
Where like, if you repeatedly tell somebody like, oh yeah, you have this diagnosis, you have this problem, and then on top of that, you have the American healthcare system, where you want to like add medication on top of that to try and make them more like everybody else.
Yes.
In some cases, maybe that's beneficial, but I think in a lot of cases, like, you know, I'll say even for myself, like when I've been, people have told me before, like, oh well, maybe you have like a attention problem, like attention deficit problem, and it's like, well, I think I do, right? But the second that it's like, oh, this is a medical condition that I have, then you no longer are like trying to find ways to cope with that. What you're doing instead is like, okay, I need a prescription to help me with that because I have a medical problem.
Yes.
And that's like, so I like, and again, some people really need that help, maybe, or, you know, they need therapy or whatever it is. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I definitely think when you add a label to it, and hey, you're part of this little group.
Yes.
We do that all over the place, whether it's, you know, mental health or, you know, just based on race or your, you know, identity and whatever you want it to be. You know, people are like, oh, well, you know, you're different because of this, instead of just being like, okay, you're a little different. Or you're not exactly what everyone else is.
They use that as a crutch too. They'll fall back on it and be like, oh, that's because I'm this, so I get a free pass.
Yeah. I used to like, I think I mentioned this to Josh one time. I was like, I met this girl, and every time she was really rude, she would say like, I'm sorry, like, this is my personality type. And she would name her personality type. And I would like, you can't do that. Like, you can't just treat someone like garbage and then just say like, this is my personality type. You treated them like garbage. Just say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Even though you might have a problem with it and you don't really realize what you're doing. It's still your fault if you do it, and you have to make, you know, arrangements. But what you're saying is so important, because you can see it as a problem, or you can see that it's just something that you have different than other people, and you're gonna make that adjustment. But because we assume that school compliant kids are the normal kids that can sit for 7 hours a day, they are the normal kids. Then the kids that cannot sit, the ADD kids, you know, they are the kids that have a problem. Like, you don't have a problem, you just don't have the same kind of, you know, performance or personality than, you know, your colleagues. That doesn't mean that we don't need you in society, because when you go work, you have people that go to the military, you have people that go to academics, you have people that go to engineering, you have different kinds of people that will go do different kinds of things. But if we train for 13, 14 years people to sit down and react the same way and think the same way, and if you don't comply, we will give you a medication that will make you sit down and be like a robot. And then you go out to the world and you're not going to be a robot. And it might be that you never figure out what you're meant to be, because you're medicated since you were not even figure out what you're meant to do yet. Like, that's not a good thing. And I think we have to break that standard as a standard to follow, because I don't think we should follow that standard at all.
It reminds me of a quote by Einstein that said, if you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, you'll think it's stupid. You know, which is a lot of the traditional schooling system, which, let's be honest, has only been around for 120, 50 years. And so for most of human history, we didn't have this 7 hours a day with the 30-minute buzzer, and then you get to your next class in 5 minutes. And, you know, for a lot of people that might work, you know, but for some of us, we don't work that way. We're not wired that way. But to your point of people who excuse themselves based on a label, if you're aware enough that you're able to call it out, you're able to be self-aware enough that you're like, oh, I know this isn't something that is socially acceptable. I know it's something that bothers people. And so I'm going to put in this little disclaimer like, oh, I'm an INTJ and that's my personality type and that's why I am who I am. If you're cognizant to that level, you're also to a degree able to change yourself. And so I think they go hand in hand. So if you're going out of your way to give me a disclaimer, you also have the cognitive ability to make changes
and adjustment.
It's the same type of thing where we saw that TikTok girl who was saying, oh, you know, I bombed this interview with a potential employer because I'm time blind.
Time blind is a real thing. Don't at me.
Yep.
But I'm grateful that I didn't have anyone in my life who said, oh, you have struggle paying attention in class. You know, this is just you being ADHD and you're going to be with this rest of your life and you jump on medication and it's okay for you to be who you are. What I knew is that I just needed to work harder than the other people around me. I needed to put more hours in because I was so unfocused. I needed to find a specific environment and curate this distraction-free environment for me to succeed. And I view that as a really formative part of my development to this day, where I'm like, I was able to develop some habits and some disciplines. And if I had just been like, no, that's just, people just tell me that's who I am and I just need to lean into that.
Yeah.
You know, how much would that have been a detriment to my own growth?
Yeah. There's a
lot.
balance, right?
Yeah.
It's a balance thing.
It's a balance because you can say like it's okay for you to be who you are because you're never going to not be like that. But when you involve other people, you have to come to a balance. You can't make other people cater to you. You have to see like if you're like what you said, if you're aware of your problems, what can you do to be a social member, you know, of this group? Like you're going to go along with it and you're going to explore your weaknesses and strengths to make this work, and you're going to be conscious enough that you will say like, you know, I can last in a conversation for 2 hours and then I start fading, you know, I start dying. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set this conversation to be like 2 hours top and then I'm going to walk away. Like, you know yourself. And it's good that you know yourself because then you're going to create environments that will make you thrive. But if you just use your condition as an excuse, then you just create an excuse for you to never grow.
Right.
You know, and it's just less work for you. But I do believe that you can be unique and you can just be you and you can be different than your colleagues. But thrive in that. You know, find environments that you're going to thrive. Like start manipulating environments so you can thrive. And that's beautiful.
Well, I'm just so glad that we were able to get you guys here.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having
much.
us. This
Yeah.
is so
Very
much
awesome.
fun.
This is our first time in the Josh and Anna podcast history to do 4 people in one podcast.
Yeah.
Because we had to do it with Tim and Jess.
Well, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Remember when we were called Imagine Two People?
I want to go back to that name.
Yeah.
Are we doing that? Is that a thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good.
Now we have Imagine 4 People.
Yeah, you're going to have to imagine 4. But thank you guys so much for listening. Definitely like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what you think in the comments below. And we will see you guys in the next podcast.
Thank you guys.
Have a good night.
See ya.
Bye.